What is up, everyone? Welcome to There Can Only Be One, the podcast that creates the all-star best of your favorite artists. And I am going to completely and utterly admit that I might be a little out of my league on this one here, because we are doing a deep dive of one of the best American rock artists of all time. And if you're not reading the title on your podcast player right now, you're probably going to guess as I introduce our guest. From the My Weekly Mixtape and Playlist Wars podcast, the one and only Brian Colburn. Brian, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I know we talked about this show as you were putting the idea together, and I immediately emailed you back and said, dude, I absolutely love it, and I'm so grateful to be one of the first guests on it. However, I have a question.
And I have an answer.
My friend. You and Kerry had that amazing Anthrax episode, which I loved. And I listened to it, and I almost listened to it a second time because I just wanted to make sure, but I didn't hear something. And you said there can only be one.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys did not answer a there can only be one question. So I'd like to put you on the spot right now if you'd be okay with that.
I have no problem with that.
Okay. There can only be one. Is it Turbin, Belladonna, Bush, or Dan Nelson? Yeah, I'll go there.
This is a tough one. I think if you're looking for vocal, for lack of a better term, vocal gymnastics and ability, I think it's Belladonna. But if you're looking at the singer with the discography that I have played over and over and over again, it would be John Bush. I think I connect more with his albums, but I agree that Joey Belladonna is the better, at least classically trained, or at least feels like classically trained vocalist. But that's, Neil Turbin is okay. He's okay. But depending on what I'm looking for at the time, if I'm looking for the album, it's Bush. If I'm looking for the singer, it's Joey. Absolutely. Also,
so there can only be one is Bush for you then.
I think, yeah. I sadly, because I think Joey is actually one of the nicest musicians that we have ever had a chance to meet and talk to. It's him and Kevin Martin from Candlebox. Both of them are just absolute gems of a human being. So absolutely appreciate the time we've had to actually get to meet them. So, but from an album perspective, it's got to be John Bush because those songs just slayed. That's just me.
Awesome. Well, I would love to hear what Kerry had to say. And look, I'm only putting you on the spot because you're putting me on the spot tonight 18 times in a row with my favorite artist of all time. So I felt like I needed to kind of level that playing field with you a little bit here.
Yeah, it's going to come as no surprise to our listeners that Brian is the largest Tom Petty fan that I have ever met. And we're going to be talking Tom Petty. 18 studio albums in total. We're talking to someone who has put out 68 singles, and we're going to do our best because you've had people comment on your posts and I've had people comment on my social media about their favorite songs and picks. So I'm going to do my best to get everyone's shout outs in there, including WK Lawrence, who actually made his own playlist for this, which I absolutely appreciate. But I'm going to get two shout outs out right now, because there's an asterisk on this one here. Stefan Luciani and Adrian Kennedy both listed Mary Jane's Last Dance, but that was released on a greatest hits album. And on this show, we only deal with studio albums. So greatest hits albums and live albums do not technically qualify for the show, although I absolutely love Mary Jane's Last Dance, even though it's also the same song as Danny California. But that's just me.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? Look, it opened up Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers to a completely different generation, because that was the first song where our generation, you and I, really were like, wow, this guy, even though he's an older artist, he gets us. Like, because the 90s Tom Petty, and we're going to get into this, is a different animal than the 80s and 70s Tom Petty. And he really adapted his music to the changing musical landscapes all the way back from 76 to 2016, which was the last album they did. And I know we're talking about 2 albums tonight that aren't even technically Tom Petty and the Heartbreaker albums. However, when 3 of the founding members are in the band, I felt like the Mudcrutch albums, because that is where Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers formed from, deserved a spot in this discussion, even though there's little asterisks next to both of those albums.
Oh, yeah. And there is something to be said about, for lack of a better term, collaborative albums. We're covering an artist on an upcoming episode where not only are we covering the studio discography, but one album where they are very heavily involved through every song, but it's not their album. But you're going to have to wait for that one. But we are here to talk about Tom Petty, or Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, or Mudcrutch. And we're going to start in 1976 with this first album, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, released November 9th, 1976. At this point in time, the band consists of Tom Petty, Mike Campbell on guitar, Ben Montench on keys, Ron Blair on bass, and Stan Lynch on drums. The album peaked at number 55 in the US and 24 in the UK, and had 3 singles. The highest one peaking, it was Breakdown. It peaked at number 40 when it was re-released in 1977. And the album is certified gold in the US. So, Brian, I'm going to let you lead the charge here on this one here. What song did you pick off of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers?
Right from the beginning, this is really tough, man. I mean, look, American Girl is the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers anthem. I get it. Every cover band in America, except for Colburn and Company, plays this song, probably because every cover band in America plays this song. But as much as I love it, I had to go with Breakdown on this one, because Breakdown is a little bit of a different animal on this album. This album has a definite punky flavor and a flair to it. And Breakdown kind of sets the tone for where this band is going to go as they move on down throughout their career. There's a little bit of a groove to it. There's a little bit of I don't even know the right word to use, but there is an element in Breakdown that I feel kind of layers all through his discography. And there's just something with the fact that you can't quite pinpoint. It's a little bluesy. It's got a little bit of a funky groove, but it's slower, it's mellow, and yet the chorus rocks. It's all things I love about Tom Petty. And yeah, it was a big single for them, and it's one of the main hits, and I am going to go deeper later on tonight, but for tonight, for at least for this first album, I got to start with Breakdown, one of the singles.
That actually has you pairing with W.K. Lawrence, who also picked Breakdown off that album. It also pairs you with me, because I completely agree.
Wow.
That song is, to pull from Playlist Wars, technically speaking, we had a trifecta on this one.
Yeah.
But there is something, it almost feels like almost like if you could turn a private eye spy type 1950s film into a musical, this would kind of be that song that has that feel to it. I almost didn't pick this song, though. I will admit, my initial knowledge of Tom Petty kind of begins and mostly ends with a lot of the singles and the greatest hits and whatnot. So when I'm going through a lot of these albums, some of these songs are first-time listens for me. And I will admit that I almost switched my pick from Breakdown to Strangered in the Night, which is a phenomenal song.
One.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But there's something about Breakdown, and I completely agree. American Girl, yeah, it's a big song. You can't go wrong with it. But for me, Breakdown is definitely, there's so much texturing. There's so much, swagger to that guitar line as well, too. So, such a great song. Such a great song. Moving on to You're Gonna Get It, released May 2nd, 1978. Peaked at number 23 in the US and 22 in the UK. Had 2 singles, including I Need to Know, which was the highest of the 2, peaking at number 41 in the US. This album also certified gold in the US. W.K. Lawrence went with the title track of the album, You're Gonna Get It. But Brian, I want to know, what song did you get off this one?
One more time, well, a couple more times, I'm going to stick with the hits, because really, I love this album This one is a little bit more raw than the self-titled. I feel like there's a little bit more. They kind of had I don't want to say more freedom with this one, but the band definitely started to come into their own more. And songs like Baby's a Rock and Roller and the title track, like you talked about just now, are fantastic songs, but edging it out ever so slightly. And that is because I love punk rock music, is the punky flair of I Need to Know, which is pretty much a punk rock Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers song. And I just love the raw attitude of this track. Yes, it's a single, and there's a couple of times tonight I am going to go for the singles because let's just be honest, Tom Petty had a lot of singles, and there's a lot of albums where, you know, the dude knows how to write a song. He knows how to write one that hits you. And there's other songs on this album that easily could have made it, but at the end of the day, I Need to Know just edges them out ever so slightly. And it was an album like this that I immediately started getting angry at you for putting me to this task because it's like choosing between your children, as Kerry said on the Anthrax episode. It's really, really hard.
Sorry, not sorry. Not gonna lie, you knew the assignment when you came in. You knew what you were signing up for.
Of course. I honestly thought it would be a lot easier. I thought it's like, oh, I could rattle off my favorite songs from a Tom Petty album like that. And then when I started listening to every album and really having to do it, I was having arguments with myself. Sitting there going, well, this one has this element and this one has that element, and what, you know, like you're weighing out, literally you're splitting hairs just trying to find any reason. And I guess me wanting to highlight kind of the punk era of this band, I won't even want to call it an era, but kind of the punk flavor of this band, that's the track to do it for me.
I can definitely tell probably the mindset that I was in when I got to this album, because obviously Breakdown has a definite feel to it in relation to some of the other songs off of the first album here. So when I stumbled onto Magnolia, and it has this almost a Roy Orbison, I Drove All Night kind of feel to it. Again, it's just a good groove all the way through. And again, this is another one of those albums where listening to the album as a whole was a first time event for me. So Magnolia this is the first time I've ever heard this song ever. And this is one of those times where I sit there and say, how was this actually not a single? And I'm sure you'll I'm sure you'll agree with this. Like, there are Tom Petty songs that are so good that never saw the radio. Unless it's on, like, you know, a Tom Petty, you know, Sirius XM channel whenever that happens. But I just love the groove of it. And it feels like Roy Orbison's I Drove All Night, just not the Cyndi Lauper cover.
No. I definitely get it. And that's another element to this band. And again, there are so many different elements, which is probably why Tom Petty resonates with me so much, because people have asked me on my weekly mixtape, how do you go from one week doing country to the next week doing hip hop to the next week doing rock to punk? I have such a vast love of music that my playlist on random scares people at times because it's so all over the place. And Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are not all over the place. They know their zone and they stay in it. However, their musical influences are all over the place, and they're sprinkled in amongst these tracks throughout 40 years of album releases. So the fact that they're able to do that, I think it's what resonates with me so much with this band.
I can just imagine what a road trip would be like with your liked songs on Spotify set to random.
You would, yeah, that would be interesting. You would definitely either have a newfound appreciation for me or you would drop me off on the side of the road.
Why is Brian hitchhiking off the highway? I don't know. Okay, moving on to October 19th, 1979, the release of Damn the Torpedoes. This is where it starts to get really, really big and potentially really tough. This album peaked at number 2 in the US and number 1 in New Zealand. 4 singles off of this one, including Don't Do Me Like That, which peaked at number 10, and Refugee, which peaked at number 15. It is triple platinum in the US and double platinum up here in Canada. I'm going to let you lead the charge on this one here. What'd you go with?
All right, this was tough for me. I actually guessed it on Records Revisited to do a dive of this album. And at the end of the day, there's a song that sticks out to me for a specific reason, but I do want to give shout outs to songs like You Tell Me and Louisiana Rain, because those are amazing, amazing tracks. You again have that punk flavor in What Are You Doing in My Life? Just such an amazing album. Century City has that punk flavor as well. Even The Losers is such a great single. But when I was a kid, one of my first albums as a child was the Chipmunks, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Chipmunk Punk. And the first song on Chipmunk Punk was a cover of Refugee. And I was playing it over and over one afternoon on my little plastic light-up record player. My father came in and said, "You like that song, huh? Let me show you something." And he played me the original, and that was my introduction to Tom Petty. And since I was, I'd say 3, 4, maybe 5 years old, Refugee is the song that started it for me. So there's no way I could not pick that as my number one track from this album.
You also pair up with W.K. Lawrence on that one, who also picked Refugee. I wonder how many artists were introduced to kids because of things like the Chipmunks. Like,
right?
Or even, for lack of a better analogy, the Mini Pops. Like, how many times do kids hear those songs and then all of a sudden realize, oh, wait, it's not done by a bunch of kids in a recording studio. It's done by someone else.
Right. Exactly.
I have a regret that I never got the chance to see Tom Petty live. Oh. That would have been such a good show. And there are certain songs when you hear it on, and I don't know if you're the same way, when I listen to some songs, they just resonate to the point where I close my eyes and I try and picture, the live environment for that song. Even The Losers did that for me on this listen. Just being like, it feels like one of those songs where the crowd is just going to scream that chorus, because it is. It's a catchy song, but it's also a bit of a rallying cry. Like, I can just imagine people almost wielding this as an anthem for themselves. Like, phenomenal song. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and as somebody who grew up being called a loser many, many, many times, I have to say it resonates with me on a personal level. That song really hits home. But at the end of the day, yeah, you know what? We do get lucky sometimes. And I can't complain with the world that life has dealt me. I'm very happy with where I stand in life. So, yes, I guess this loser did get lucky sometime. And hell, just the fact that I could sit here and geek out over Tom Petty with you, I'm pretty damn lucky if I say so myself.
Yep. Even the losers sometimes get lucky. Love it. Absolutely love it. Absolutely associate with that. Moving on. 1981, May 5th is the release of Hard Promises. This album peaked at number 5 in the US and once again number 1 in New Zealand. It is platinum in both the US and Canada. 2 singles off this one. The Waiting being the biggest one. That hit number 1 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts. W.K. Lawrence chimed in with something big. And I'm going to take the lead on this one here, because sure. I need to explain something here. In my band, we do a cover of Stop Dragging My Heart Around, which is Stevie Nicks with Tom Petty. Mm-hmm. So when I saw that Stevie Nicks guested on a song on this album, I thought this was going to be a no-brainer. But it wasn't. Because I had to go with A Woman in Love, It's Not Me. There's something I love about Tom Petty's ability, not just to write a catchy song. It's not just catchy hooks. Like that's Kiss. Kiss writes catchy hooks, catchy choruses, and the like. Tom Petty not only can write those catchy hooks, but he's also a wonderful storyteller with his songs. Like, you could see a script being pulled out of the lyrics of this song and turned into a movie. Absolutely love this song. Again, another one of those songs that's kind of a first listen for me in some cases. Was blown away by it. I didn't think I was going to pick the not Stevie Nicks one.
It's tough not to pick Insider. It's a great song. Night Watchman is an amazing song. Obviously, everybody talks about The Waiting. It's one of those Tom Petty kind of anthems. He's got so many of them. It almost sounds like I'm doing the song a disservice calling it an anthem because there are so many. But you and I are in lockstep with this. A Woman in Love, It's Not Me is my pick as well. And it's mostly for Mike Campbell in this one. That lead guitar in the song is so perfect. He doesn't overplay the track. It's not a hard riff to play on lead guitar, even if you're not a lead guitarist. But it's so perfect for the story that's being told that it is literally why Campbell and Petty, in my opinion, could do no wrong, because they just spoke to each other on a musical level. And here it is, you've got the lyrics like you're talking about, and Campbell kind of calling and answering it with that guitar part. And it's so perfect. So you and I are a crossover on that one. And as we were with Breakdown. Interesting.
I know this is one of those things where when people come onto the show, it's going to be like, I wonder what they're going to pick. I can just imagine what your thought process was going into this, I wonder how close our songs are going to align. So far, as I'm doing the count here, 1, 2, 3, 4 albums, we've crossed over twice.
Interesting. Very interesting, because I've been listening to these albums for decades, and some of them for you are like a first listen, which I think is amazing, because for somebody that's been listening as long as I have, even aligning once would have been like, oh, really cool. And now we've done it twice. I'll be very curious, though, with 12 more, if that happens a third time.
Yeah, we've got the long road ahead of us here. But that means we're going to Long After Dark. Now we're getting into the meat of the 80s here. Released November 2nd, 1982. We have a member change now. Ron Blair is out of the band. Howie Epstein is now on bass. This album peaked at number 9 in the U.S., had 3 singles, the highest being You Got Lucky, which hit number 1 on the U.S. mainstream charts. It is gold in both U.S. and Canada. And W.K. Lawrence chimed in. He's got You Got Lucky as his pick. Do you?
I'll make this easy. Yes, I do. It is one of my favorite Tom Petty songs of all time. Once again, it's a single, but I've been covering that for the last several years with Colburn and Company. It's one of my favorite songs of his to sing. It just happens to be right in my range. And it's a song that works both as a heavy rocker, the way Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers do it, or as a beautiful ballad, the way Blackberry Smoke covered it a few years ago. And my band, Colburn and Company, does it both ways, depending on the venue, because it works perfectly in both settings. So to me, it's one of those songs that, and there's another one that falls into this exact category where Fast and Slow works perfectly for Tom Petty, for a Tom Petty show, or for me. So it's the same kind of excuse for making it be the pick of mine as one other song I'm going to talk about in a little bit.
I'm not going to lie. I did not pick You Got Lucky.
All right.
But this album was tough. To the point of I actually wrote down 2 songs thinking that I'm going to have to make a choice by the time we get to that point. We're at that point. I kind of have to make a choice right now because there can only be one. I'll tell you the song that isn't the choice, though, and that was Straight Into Darkness.
I actually almost thought that would be one from you. I really, really did.
But it got beat out by Deliver Me.
Nice. Okay.
Again,
okay.
Another one of those songs where, yeah, sometimes you just can't explain why it hits you. But again, just listen to this, and I knew some of the songs on here. I knew You Got Lucky, but when a song all of a sudden like just clicks, and that was the thing. Both times, Straight Into Darkness and Deliver Me, both times, just like. Yeah, no, they rule. They knock out the bigger songs. It was so good. And again, I'm really surprised. Like I knew there were going to be a lot of songs to go through on this one. I didn't even bother trying to count how many of them there were going to be. I know we have another episode that we are in the works right now planning, covering Krista Berg's full discography of 23 albums, and he's still putting stuff out. That's going to be a long one. I could just imagine that one may end up being 2 episodes. I'm not going to lie.
I was just going to say that feels like a 2-parter, man. Wait till you get into the Stones, which is at what, like 40 something?
Please, Stones, stop putting out albums. But the fact that Chris de Burgh is also still putting out new stuff and still touring out there, a phenomenal storyteller. And Chris de Burgh admittedly was one of my first musical introductions. Like, my mother was a huge Chris de Burgh fan. There were always Chris de Burgh albums out. He was my first concert to go to. Very much a storyteller. Same thing with Tom Petty. Very much a storyteller, just I think with hookier riffs than someone like a Chris de Burgh. So yeah, this album made it tough, and it was one of the tougher albums to pick from. But that moves us to March 26th, 1985's Southern Accents. This album peaked at number 7 in the U.S., platinum in the U.S., gold in Canada. I don't know what's wrong with us. This album had 3 singles, the highest being Don't Come Around Here No More, which hit number 2 on the mainstream rock charts. That was also W.K. Lawrence's pick. I did not know the story behind that song. I was so reading about Dave Stewart being in Stevie Nicks' and her trying out Victorian dresses or something like that. Like, it's a fascinating story to read when you're on Wikipedia, but not the song I picked. I got hit so hard by the title track, Southern Accents.
Oh yeah.
It's such a good mood. Like bring it down low, bring it down like almost hurt storytelling. And I know that the idea was for this to almost be a somewhat concept album, but when that song comes on and you can almost see the viewpoint of someone talking about the perception of people with Southern accents. I'm just like, this song's got a lot of hurt to it, it feels like.
Oh, definitely. It definitely pulls at the heartstrings on you. And this song has been covered by a lot of country artists because, why? It pulls at the heartstrings, which is something country really aims to do. And there's a reason why every country artist, I think by law, has to name drop Tom Petty in one of their songs, because I feel like it happens in every other country song. And it's because Tom Petty crosses over to country so easily, even though he's not a country singer, because of the stories he tells. It crosses genres, it crosses boundaries, and that is a good example of him doing that.
And what have you got from Southern Accents?
This was a tough one. I really wanted to go with Rebels, the opening track. I'm a sucker for opening tracks. I mean, I already chose Refugee tonight, and Rebels is such a killer opener. But I'm actually going to go with a song that was not a single. However, it is a song that is known in the Tom Petty community because his most recent Greatest Hits album was named after it. And that version has an alternate version of the song with an additional verse in it. But I'm going to go with The Best of Everything. Just a beautiful, beautiful closer to this album. And it's a heartbreaker. I mean, just listening to the words, the one section of the chorus. So listen, honey, wherever you are tonight, I wish you the best of everything in the world. And honey, I hope you found whatever you were looking for. It hits. And in the song, it hits even harder. So going with the heartbreaker on this one, the ballad.
I don't know if Tom Petty gets enough. He gets lots of credit for his songwriting. He gets lots of credit for his storytelling. He gets lots of credit for the hooks and the riffs. I don't know if he gets enough credit for the slower songs and being able to create those moods. It's not the first thought when it comes to Tom Petty, but some of these songs, they definitely fit into that mold. And call them ballads or not, but they are such good, quieter songs. It's absolutely love it. Moving on. Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, released April 27th, 1987. This album peaked at number 20 in the U.S. It is gold in the U.S. and platinum in Canada. I don't know what's wrong with the U.S. 4 singles off this one, including Jammin' Me, which hit number 1 on the mainstream rock charts. Brian, what have you got one for Let Me Up, I've Had Enough?
Another tough album. This is where it starts to really get tough, because this is where I was discovering Tom Petty albums, because, you know, I had listened to Refugee, but if you think about my age then, by the time we get to Let Me Up, I've had enough. I'm 10 years old. I'm starting to go to malls more with my friends and starting to walk around music stores. So I'm starting to discover music on my own. And this was one of the first Tom Petty albums that I kind of discovered on my own. So easily the opening track, Jammin' Me, is one of his best rockin' singles. I love it. I love a good album opener. Runaway Trains, another good one. This guy knows how to pick singles. And I'm actually going to go with the last single he released from the album, Think About Me. The reason I did that is, again, Tom Petty has a lot of different styles. And while I'm not a big fan of this terminology that is used, the kids these days, now, when people call a song a bop, I kind of laugh, because in my mind, a bop is the song structure that's used in Think About Me. The song literally bops, because if you were to hum the song to somebody, you'd say bop, bop, da, 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 da. Like that is it's a bop. You're actually saying it the way they're chugging the chords in this song. So I don't like using the song. I don't like using this word to describe a song. However, it's the word that does describe it. So I'm going with Think About Me, because it's a bop.
When it works, it works. I have to say, though, the W.K. Lawrence went with It'll All Work Out. So bop and that song, I guess it does kind of work out. And that's the song I went with as well. This is, I don't know if I was influenced by listening to Southern Accents before this, because I went through it chronologically, you know, and Southern Accents put me in that mellow vibe. It'll All Work Out, again, right in that mellow vibe pocket. Like, I don't know which Tom Petty I like more. Rockin' Tom Petty, punkin' Tom Petty, or mellow Tom Petty. And it's hard. I guess a lot of it depends on your mood at the time and what you're looking for. You and I have had this discussion before, that you could literally revisit any of these artists in later episodes, and your choices may be different, because depending on the mood that you're in at the time, or the vibe that you're feeling, might influence the song that stands out the most for you. So coming off of picking Southern Accents, it kind of makes sense that It'll All Work Out kind of fit into that mold. But again, this is another album where, you know, aside from Jammin' Me, a lot of this was brand spanking new to me. So I almost have to thank you for forcing me to go. And that's the thing I love about this show and the show idea is, in some cases, our knowledge of certain artists is limited to what is released as a single. So whatever the record company deems is the song you need to hear, but that's not always the best song.
Oh, the album listens. And that's something that, even with my weekly mixtape, I catch myself doing, especially when we do a band episode. Because when you want to have a bank of songs, listening to all the albums really helps you choose that bank to kind of go from. When we're doing episodes that are about a theme, and I'm thinking about 10 million bands, I unfortunately don't have all the time in the world to listen to all of those bands' discographies, although that would be pretty awesome if I did have that kind of time. But alas, here we are.
We need to create a job, music inspector. Like have the pin, music inspector number 37, and it's your job to listen to albums as they come out and give your opinions on them. You need that job. Music inspector number 37.
And if anybody out there is hiring for a music inspector, I have decades of experience.
We need to get that shirt. Hello, I am music inspector number 37. We are at the last album of the 1980s. That is his first solo album, Full Moon Fever, released April 24th, 1989. The biggest difference behind the scenes, of course, is on at least playing instruments is Jeff Lynne is playing bass on this one and Phil Jones is playing drums. This album peaked at number 3 in the U.S. It is quintuple platinum in the States, 6 times platinum in Canada, and gold in Britain. I don't know what's wrong with Britain. This album had 5 singles. 3 of them hit number 1 on the mainstream rock charts. I Won't Back Down, Running Down a Dream, and Free Falling. And this is where the shoutouts get big. Christian Battaglia chimed in with I Won't Back Down. W.K. Lawrence chimed in with Free Fallin', and Dan Allard chimed in with Running Down a Dream. So as we close out the 80s, Brian, Full Moon Fever, what song stood out for you?
Well, the 3 shout-out songs were 3 of the ones that I was highly, highly, highly debating on. This is where the albums get really tough for me, because the next stretch is my time with Petty. Let me say, every band has like a 3-album run. You think about, when you think about Metallica, a lot of people will say Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All, or Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, depending on which direction you go. This section of Tom Petty for me is kind of like that 3 album where he could do 0 wrong, even though I pretty much don't think he could do any wrong, period. This is my favorite stretch we're in right now. So The Hardest Time. I actually am going to go with one that I covered for my Life Happens album that I put out back in 2009. Unfortunately, I did not secure the rights to release it digitally. I only secured the rights to release it on CD. So if you're one of the 200 people who own this album, you'll know the song I'm about to pick. But for the rest of the trillions of people around the world, that song would be You're So Bad. It is a barroom stomp. It's got a little bit of a country vibe to it. It's got a little bit of a ragtime barroom feel to it. And again, he's telling stories that just feel like you're watching a movie through the song. It's so good. It's so much fun. And it's infectious. And there is no way I was able to bring that out in my version of the song. I released it knowing I was doing a disservice to the song, but I love it so much. And I was so blessed that my keyboard player for many years, Chris Van Cleef, came in and put this old school ragtime piano underneath it to kind of give my version a little bit of a different vibe, to almost feel like it was a bar room ragtime type song. I was so thrilled with the way it came out. And at the time, Tom Petty was still alive. I was just praying one day he would hear it, because of how much his music meant to me. So that's my pick for this one. A little bit of a long-winded story, but you're going to get long-winded when it comes to Tom Petty with me. I am as I knew signing up for the episode that this was going to be hard. You knew that when you said you want to be a guest.
Oh, I knew it, and I completely welcomed it. I love that you picked You're So Bad based on playing it live. I have had the fortune of being able to play some of these songs live with various bands that I've been in. Free Fallin' is definitely one of them. Running Down a Dream has been one of them that I've played live. But there's one that I haven't had a chance to play live yet. Always have to put the yet in. And I did say that I've never seen Tom Petty live, but I did get a chance to see Pop Evil in Columbus at Rock on the Range before they changed it to Sonic Temple. Kick out I Won't Back Down live. And you want to tell me that a band like this song exploded live? Like, even people who weren't into Pop Evil at the time, because you do get that at festivals, you know, like a band comes on and, you know, half the crowd's going to like them, half of the crowd's going to be like, who the hell are these guys? Everyone, as soon as they started playing that song, it's like, yep, no, we're all on board with this one here. They killed it. This is a song that I would love to be able to get a chance to play live. I just, again, this is the pickup too. You know, after Southern Accents, after It'll All Work Out off of Let Me Up, I've Had Enough. This song, if it's in the car, I run the risk of getting a speeding ticket. There are certain songs like that. This is definitely one of them. Before we jump into the 90s, I want to give you a moment, Brian, to let us know a little bit about My Weekly Mixtape.
Well, My Weekly Mixtape is a weekly show where I do exactly what I did growing up, which is record mixtapes. I always made mixtapes when I was younger. If I was good and I got good grades and I got all my chores done at the end of the week, when my folks would go food shopping, they would let me come along and I would be able to stop and grab a 2-pack of blank tapes, which would give me something to do mixtaping for the next week with. And that was kind of my, you work hard, here's your allowance, so to speak. And I worked for tapes, and I would come home and record stuff off the radio and record stuff off of CDs and dubbing cassettes from one to the other with my friends. We would bring all of our music collections to each other's house, like our case of 30 or 50 tapes, and we would make mixtapes together. And I wanted to recapture that for the new generation, because when everybody creates a playlist, it's almost mindless. Oh, I'll just add this song to that playlist. I'll just drag this onto that playlist. I'll just drag this onto that playlist. The sequence of songs sometimes falls at the wayside in favor of the shuffle button. The idea of telling your own story through different songs from different artists is gone, and it's more just, here are a bunch of good songs to work out to. And while we will do a workout episode on my weekly mixtape, for me, it was never just, here's a bunch of good songs to work out to. Here's the way I approach it is, if I'm going to be working out, what's the song I'm going to start by warming up with? And then what am I going to take that next song into? And it was a calculated effort. And that's what I'm trying to bring each week as we discuss different artists and different bands and different mixes coming from two different locations when we pick a topic, such as the premiere episode of the show, which would be opening guitar riffs. I'm just going to venture a wild guess that you heard that one.
I might have heard it. I'm going to say that the guest you had on, bit of a knob, but he held his own, I think.
Joking aside,
I have to ask, when you were making your mixtapes, how often were you able to take a look at how much was left on the spool and know exactly how much time you had left?
I was pretty damn good at it. However, I had a foolproof plan in place. So the ending tape at the end of the sides never mattered, because I had a bank of songs ready to fill that space up no matter what the mixtape I was making was. So if I was making a mixtape of love songs, it didn't matter. If there was space at the end of the sides, you were getting Last Caress by Metallica, not with Green Hell, just Last Caress, because that was 90 seconds. Usually that was good enough. However, if that wasn't good enough, I went into Stormtroopers of Death from the Speak English or Die album. I would grab The Ballad of Jimi Hendrix, which was about 4 seconds. I would grab Dear Gordy, or Hey Gordy, which was about 3 seconds, and Diamonds and Rust, which was 2 seconds. And if that left a little bit of space at the end of the tape, I would go to the Descendants and I would pull the song All, which is 1 second long, and then All, No All, which is 2 seconds long. So that way, at the end of the side, when one of those songs ended, it would just be flip onto the next side.
Right now, there are people who have no idea what, the idea of the cassette and the spool and whatnot. I will say, though, I still have 3 in the package 90-minute cassettes in my storage drawer in my office waiting to be used. So if you need cassettes, I got you covered.
There's something about doing things in real time that brought a passion to it. And for me, I was always passionate about music, and I am still now. And being able to relive that each week with discussions with friends and with fellow podcasters, and in some instances, the songwriters themselves to come onto the show. I had Lit on the show recently, Kevin Baldus, and we did a Lit mixtape from a fan versus actual member of the band perspective. So we built what I think is the ultimate Lit mix, because it's coming from half of a fan and half of the guy that wrote the songs. So that's kind of what I'm trying to capture, bringing back the thought process to why songs work well together. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hope that listeners of the show will take away from it.
And the funny thing is, like, for anyone who has not had a chance to listen to my weekly mixtape, part of the fun of the show, as you're listening to it, is trying to figure out what songs you would add next in the list. Because as someone who's been on the show, that's almost like the game show aspect of it. It's almost like dominoes. All right, that's what's on the table. Here's what I would put next. It's a fun play along. It's a great listen. You've got a great show. So that is my weekly mixtape. So Brian, now we're into the 1990s with Tom Petty. Into the Great Wide Open, arguably one of his biggest albums of all time, released July 2nd. We're back now to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, peaked at number 13 in the US. It is 2 times platinum in US and Canada, platinum in Sweden, gold in Britain and Switzerland. 7 singles off of this album. 2 of them hit number 1 on the mainstream rock charts, Learning to Fly and Out in the Cold. Almost every song, I think, got mentioned in the shout outs here. So let me just kind of run through here, speed run this. Dan Allard chose The Dark of the Sun. W.K. Lawrence went with Into the Great Wide Open. Justin Fortune went with All or Nothing. Learning to Fly got lots of picks here. We got Anthony Monkey Noodles, Jason Skull, and at Billy Warren 9. Making Some Noise got picked by at McMuppet 69, and then King's Highway got chosen by the Beer in Front podcast, Tim Kendall, and the Records Revisited podcast. So I don't know if you're matched up with any of them or if there's any songs left on the album that haven't been mentioned, but what have you got off of Into the Great Wide Open?
This is undoubtedly one of the band's most underrated albums. Yes, it had 7 singles. Yes, it was massive, but I feel like people look over it because Learning to Fly and Into the Great Wide Open were not the free-falling, I Won't Back Down, running down a dream trio that Full Moon Fever had. So this album is one of my absolute favorites by the band. Again, it's part of that trio of albums that could do no wrong. Any of the ones people mentioned, there's 7 singles from the album. There could have been 12, and it still would have been a massive album. But King's Highway was right there. I was so close to picking it. However, when the pandemic first hit, I was really having a hard time being at home, not being able to play gigs, not being able to kind of talk music with people or have that musical outlet. And I called up my drummer and said, "Hey, dude, you want to try one of those like quarantine videos for the band?" And he said, "Sure, just throw a song at me." I said, "Let's just go with the one we started, most of our shows with, Learning to Fly." And he sent me him just playing the drums to it. I went and recorded my guitar and vocals, and I just started reaching out to every single musician I knew. And when all was said and done, I think I had 25 different people on the video, and I edited it all together, put it up on YouTube, and I can share it with you if you'd like to embed it on the site, just for context. But it's basically me reaching out to my friends and having a big jam session at the beginning of the pandemic when nobody was jamming anymore. And being able to cut it and have everybody playing and performing the song together was so special to me. And I referenced earlier going back to Long After Dark when I talked about You Got Lucky being one of those songs that could flip-flop between a ballad and a rocker. Learning to Fly as the opening track. I love my opening tracks. It's a great rock song, but you strip it down to the ballad, like the version that's on the live anthology with Stevie Nicks as your backing vocalist. Every time I hear that song, the hair on my arm stand up and it brings tears to my eyes, because at the end of the song, the entire crowd is singing back the chorus back to Tom Petty. They're singing it and he's just freestyle singing over it, kind of like a preacher at the end of the song, but he's doing it in a real soft-spoken voice. And it's such a beautiful live moment. It's one of my favorite live recordings of all time, but we're not talking about live albums tonight, but I'm glad I got to chime in with it now. So yeah, Learning to Fly is it. Again, long-winded story there again, but this is Tom Petty, and I don't know how to do short-winded with him.
Not a problem there. Learning to Fly, as a music video guy, Learning to Fly definitely kind of sticks in my brain because, of course, it was a really well done video. Not as good as Don't Come Around Here No More. That's a phenomenal freaking video. But I go back to the storytelling aspect, and I don't think there is a song in Tom Petty's discography that is as almost cinematic in lyrical content as Into the Great Wide Open.
Yeah.
It's akin to Summer of '69. It's akin to Living on a Prayer. The song of these kids and trying to make it big, and the world is wide open. Like, absolutely a storyteller more so than a songwriter in this case. And if you're not singing along with this one, you're doing something wrong. You're absolutely doing something wrong. But yeah, there is a ton of great material. Again, this is another one of those albums that was really tough to narrow it down, but I couldn't not pick Into the Great Wide Open. Now we're back to another solo album. November 1st, 1994 saw the release of Wildflowers. Again, biggest difference in the music personnel on this one, Steve Ferrone is on drums for this. It peaked at number 5 in the US. It is triple platinum in the States, double platinum in Canada, and silver in Britain. 4 singles off of this one. You Don't Know How It Feels hit number 1 on the mainstream rock charts. You Wreck Me hit number 2, and It's Good to Be King at number 6. Big shout out to W.K. Lawrence again for Time to Move On. And Dan Allard with Wildflowers, the title track off the album. And I'm not going to lie, I thought about Wildflowers, but Crawling Back to You, again, this is one of those times where it's not necessarily just the storytelling aspect of it, but it's almost like for lack of a better term, it almost feels very vulnerable the way he's writing this song. You could almost see this as a love letter to, per se. And again, musically, of course, it just hit. But what have you got off of Wildflowers?
Well, this is my favorite Tom Petty album. So this was the hardest choice ever for me. I could literally talk about this album for hours and have on Records Revisited a second time. We did a 2+ hour episode going through this and rating the album track by track, and it's a tough one. This is such a perfect album. You Don't Know How It Feels is the song I used to try out for my first school play my senior year in high school, and it was to try out for You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I ended up getting the part as Schroeder, which I've talked about on shows before, but that song has a real personal connection to me. You Wreck Me is a great rock tune. Wildflowers is a gorgeous, beautiful, stunning ballad. However, Tom Petty knew how to rock. And he brings the rock maybe heavier than any other song in his whole catalog in the middle of this solo album, and that would be Honeybee. The song is so grungy. It's so heavy. This is a song that when it came out, in 1994, it could have challenged any hard rock song on modern rock radio at the time. And Tom Petty was considered one of the dinosaurs from the Traveling Wilburys. And damn it, this song just kicks. And another thing, they have the other version, All the Rest, which was like the posthumous compilation that came out. And then you have some of the singles like Girl on LSD, which was absolutely hysterical, fun song. But yeah, none of them rock like Honeybee does. So for me, being the rock guy, I mean, hell, the Foo Fighters covered this one, and there's a reason, because it rocks, and Honeybee.
Okay, moving on to songs and music from the movie She's the One. Released August 6, 1996, we got Steve Ferrone now full-time on drum with the Heartbreakers. This album is gold in the US and peaked at number 15. 3 singles off this one includes Walls, which peaked at number 6 on the mainstream charts, and now he's starting to chart on the adult alternative charts. This one hit number 1. Dan Allard chose Walls number 3 as a song off this one. W.K. Lawrence went with Walls Circus. And I had to double check, because admittedly I have not seen this movie yet, but I was just curious. And those who listen to the show know that I'm also the host of It's Not That Bad.
It's funny you're bringing this up.
She's the One does not qualify for It's Not That Bad. It has a 62% rating on the Tomatometer. So we will not, unfortunately, be talking about She's the One on It's Not That Bad. But we will be talking about the soundtrack. So, Brian, which song is the one for you?
Well, I will just say I bought the DVD years ago and still have never watched it, because every time I go to watch it, somebody says to me, just don't. Just enjoy the music. But I do want to see how these songs played into it. This is another great album. I have a candle that I got last summer on vacation. I haven't used it yet. It's small. It's about the size of my fist. And it says on it, inscribed, "Some days are diamonds, some days are rocks." Tom Petty, 1996 in Los Angeles. I could have very easily went with Walls Circus. I didn't. I went with what I feel is kind of the sequel to Honeybee. And that would be Climb That Hill. Again, another heavy alternative rock song. It's got that grungy Mike Campbell guitar in it. Was not a single, and just sticks out to me from this album the way that Honeybee did on Wildflowers. So I'm going to go with Climb That Hill.
I had to go with Grew Up Fast.
Nice.
As I'm listening to this song, and I recognize it's a soundtrack and whatnot, but even if this album was not already a soundtrack, Grew Up Fast is the kind of song that you could easily see tossed into many different movies. It's moody. You could almost see the conflict between main characters as you're listening to the song. Like, if it wasn't already in a movie, it should have been in a movie. It really set a tone. And, I recognize that she's the one is supposed to be, I don't know if you would classify it as a rom-com or whatnot. It's an Ed Burns film. So it's definitely has that, not even as a coming of age story, but even if Tom Petty didn't do the soundtrack for that movie, you could take Grew Up Fast, put it into any Ed Burns movie. You could put it into any coming of age movie. It is such a good song. Absolutely such a good song. The last album of the 1990s for Tom Petty is Echo, released April 13th, 1999. Peaked at number 10 in the U.S., gold in U.S. and Canada, 5 singles. Like, you think Tom Petty had some singles? Still, 1999, 5 singles.
You want singles? We got singles. We got singles coming out.
Some of the highest ones were Free Girl Now, which was number 5 on the mainstream rock charts and number 3 on the adult alternative charts, and Room at the Top, which hit number 1 on the adult alternative charts. Does it make you feel old when Tom Petty starts to chart on the adult alternative charts?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It did back in 1999, and I still love this album.
So what do you have off of Echo?
Well, Echo's the one album by them that I'm actually pissed at the band for, because one of my favorite Tom Petty songs of all time could have been on this album, and that was the B-side to the Room at the Top single, which is Sweet William. One of my absolute, easily top 10 favorites by the band. It's a straight-up blues song, slow blues, but at the halfway point, it goes into this manic Mike Campbell solo that's 180 miles an hour and then brings you right back into the blues again. It may not have made sense thematically from an album standpoint, but I had to talk about this song tonight, and this was the place where I just want to yell at them for not putting it on. However, the album as a whole, fantastic. Room at the Top, great song, but I actually went with Swingin'. Again, that storytelling coming out in full force.
As I was listening to the albums, and this was another album where it was really a first time listen for me. And as I'd get through it, I'm like, okay, this song really kind of sticks and all that. And so I would put it onto my list, but still go through the rest of the album. And Swingin' was actually holding that spot for me until the end.
Wow.
Until the end. Because I have to agree with W.K. Lawrence on this one here. One More Day, One More Night.
Great album closer.
Love.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. And there are certain bands that I stand up and applaud for their ability to nail like a bit of a quieter but still kind of emotional album closer. Queensryche is one of those bands. Being able to end Empire with Anybody Listening, being able to end Rage for Order. I can't remember the name of the song. It's killing me right now. But this as a closer, and I was all set. I was like, all right, yeah, swinging out this one. It's all good. And then the song hits. Mm-hmm. Delete, type in. Okay, we have the song now. Again, absolutely agree with W.K. Lawrence. One More Day, One More Night. Now we're into the 2000s with The Last DJ, released October 8th, 2002. This is where Howie Epstein had to step away from the band, and Ron Blair came back into the fold. This album peaked at number 9 on the U.S. with 3 singles. The Last DJ actually peaked at number 22 on the mainstream rock charts and 12 on the adult alternative charts. W.K. Lawrence chimed in with When a Kid Goes Bad. As we were all week, as we were messaging back and forth, getting ready for this episode here, I said there was one album that blew my mind when I listened to it. Again, this was another first listen for me. The Last DJ as a whole feels like the concept album that Tom Petty never really wrote. It feels like a Pink Floyd concept album. There are some songs on here where I'm just like, I could almost hear Roger Waters on vocals with some of these songs. And the song Joe absolutely could fit anywhere in Pink Floyd's The Wall. Like,
oh God, yeah, it's storytelling at its finest.
Oh yeah, and angry storytelling too. Like, I'm surprised at the ferocity behind Joe. Like, I'm sitting there going, "Damn, Tom Petty got pissed." But
yep.
How is The Last DJ for you? Because it does. It feels like a concept album.
This is one where I have always been. I like the album, but I have to be in a specific mood to listen to this, because it's not the Tom Petty that is woven through other albums. He is telling a story. And if, let's say, The Last DJ is the theme of the whole album, it's the name of the album, and you just listen through lyrically through songs like Joe, When a Kid Goes Bad, Have Love Will Try, this album really takes you on this journey. And for me, I got to be in a specific frame of mind to listen to this one. There are songs I love on the album, but as an album as a whole, this one is probably on the lower end of the list. Again, I don't hate it in any way, shape, or form, but if I was picking hairs, it would probably be at the lower side of the spectrum for me.
It just goes to show that no matter what you think of an artist, there is an album in their discography for everyone. Absolutely. But what song did you pick off The Last DJ?
I am going to agree with one of the chime-ins, and I'm going to go with When a Kid Goes Bad. It takes the storytelling part we've been just hounding on tonight, and it brings that heft that you got on Wildflowers with Honeybee and on She's the One's Climb That Hill. It kind of is that same vibe to me, and I love it. So When a Kid Goes Bad.
We're now on to Highway Companion, released July 25th, 2006. This album peaked at number 4 in the US and gold certified. 3 singles off this one, including Saving Grace, which hit number 26 on the mainstream rock charts and number 1 on the adult alternative charts. We'll just call that the Tom Petty chart for now. W.K. Lawrence chimed in with Turn This Car Around. And as I'm looking at my list, I'm realizing that not many of the songs that made my list were singles. This is going to be the exception, because Saving Grace, like right off the bat, opening track, opening single, and, almost a very welcoming song to the album, especially coming off an album like The Last DJ.
Completely agree. We have our third match of the night too, because I went with that as well. Talk about an album opener. It's a fantastic one. It's got a ZZ Top LaGrange vibe to it, and it's different. And even if he, I know there's been some talk that he ripped it off, and he didn't. There's only so many chords. If anything, Danny California ripped off Mary Jane's Last Dance, but that's here nor there, because even Tom Petty said there's only so many chords and only so many ways to play them. I love this song. It kicks ass, and I couldn't picture Highway Companion not starting this way. So yeah, I went with Saving Grace as well.
That leads us to the curveball of the podcast, because we're talking Mudcrutch. This is Tom Petty's band before the Heartbreakers, and then they reformed, releasing this first album on April 29th, 2008. The band consists of Tom Petty, Mike Campbell, Benmont Tench, Tom Leadon, and Randall Marsh. The album peaked at number 8 in the US and had singles including Scare Easy. I didn't even know Tom Petty was involved in this. So when you mentioned like, oh yeah, no, if we're doing Tom Petty, we need to cover Mudcrutch. So for you, how is this album different from everything else?
I love this album. They flex their muscles on some covers like 6 Days on the Road and Lover of the Bayou. Tom Petty's playing bass. I'm a bass player. This is the first time where I'm like, wait a minute, he's what? And sure enough, he's on bass in this, like they did in the band prior to the Heartbreakers when he moved over to guitar. So he's not up there with that, playing the guitar. It almost feels wrong, but it works in such a cool way. And it's a little bit more Southern rock, a little bit more country-esque, and it's such a fun album. If people go to this album looking for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, you're going to hear pieces of it in Crystal River, but it's not a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album, and you got to be prepared for that, but I absolutely love it. And my pick for this one is actually not one of the cover songs, because I am a massive cover song junkie. However, the original, The Wrong Thing to Do, has a swagger to it like no other, and I absolutely love it.
I thought we were going to pair up on this one here. I thought we were going to have, another match here, because I know your love of cover songs. So
I was hard pressed, man, hard pressed.
So I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little surprised that you didn't go with 6 Days on the Road, because I did.
All right, I'm glad. Good.
It's funny too, because as I'm going through my playlist and re-listening to the songs again in preparation for the show, like even my mother hears this and goes, "I know that song." I'm like, "I didn't know you knew Mudcrutch." She's like, I don't think that's Mudcrutch." I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. But yeah, so the fact that, here's where an artist taking a cover, turning it into their own. I had never heard the song before. I will admit, I am not a trucker. So obviously it's not in my normal range of songs I would go out and listen to. But I love it. I just absolutely love it. It's a great driving song. It's got a good rocking beat to it. I was suitably impressed with this one here. Now we're back to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers albums here with Mojo, released June 15th, 2010, peaked at number 2 in the US. 4 singles off of this one, including I Should Have Known, which was the only one that hit the charts off this album. Hit number 40 on the mainstream rock charts and number 4 on the Tom Petty adult alternative charts. W.K. Lawrence chimed in with Something Good Coming. Brian, what have you got off of Mojo?
WK and I had a very hard time. We were almost lined up, because Something Good Coming is a haunting ballad. I love the Mojo album, and this was the last tour I got to see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers live. So this album does mean a lot to me. My father and I went to this show, and he had not heard Mojo yet. But when the opening guitar riff of I Should Have Known It kicked in, he immediately turned to me and goes, "What's this?" I said, "It's on the new album." As soon as the song ended, he goes, "I need to get that new album." And sure enough, it was Mojo, and it was because of I Should Have Known It. Song just kicks your ass, and it is so perfect because it is a heavier, bluesier side to Tom Petty, which, if you see sprinkled through some of my picks tonight, does happen to fall through there, because I am a hard rock guy at heart.
I'm going to play a little My Weekly Mixtape as far as this part goes here. So if I were to follow Magnolia from his second album with any song, it would have to come off of this album, and it would be Running Man's Bible.
Nice. Okay.
It's got like a almost, you can almost picture like an old Coupe de Ville driving down the road with those little like din 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 in it, like kind of guitar notes on it. Like it almost feels like Magnolia and Running Man's Bible are almost sort of related, if you will. Maybe it's just me and musically, because I know obviously the lyrics aren't connected, but musically it definitely feels like the two of them should go hand in hand together. So there's my weekly mixtape there for a version of Tom Petty. That's what I would follow Magnolia with. Running Man's Bible, such a great song. Absolutely love this. We are now on to the final Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album, which is Hypnotic Eye. Released July 28th, 2014, this album hit number 1 in the US with 3 singles, including You Get Me High, which hit number 2 on the adult alternative charts. W.K. Lawrence chimed in with Shadow People, and that is his last chime in because he did not get the second Mudcrutch album. So big thank you to W.K. Lawrence for putting in the work and getting a full list together. That was very awesome. Thank you very much. But what have you got off Hypnotic Eye?
This is another, like Into the Great Wide Open, underrated Tom Petty album, and their last, so it is their official swan song. They might have other albums in the archives, maybe cobbled together different songs from the years, but this is their last official album when Tom was alive. And I actually wanted to go with Playing Dumb because it's just a dirty riff. It's so good, but it's only on the vinyl and Blu-ray versions. So I wanted to really hold myself to whatever versions most people can find, because if you don't have the vinyl or Blu-ray and you're not looking it up on YouTube, it's kind of hard to hear the song I'm talking about. So for me, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers always had this, every now and then they would do a song where I'd be like, man, that feels like it could be in a movie. And if you go back to Into the Great Wide Open, you have a song, All or Nothing. To me, that feels like the band's 007 James Bond type song. Feels like it was the James Bond theme that was never written. And when I hear a song like Fault Lines, I feel like it missed its place in a movie like Pulp Fiction. The ride work that Steve Ferrone is doing on the ride cymbal during that song, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, it just gives you this like funkadelic, psychedelic kind of, I don't know, I'm just picturing a lot of tie-dye in the background as this song is playing. It's just so trippy and such a weird placement on an album coming right after one of the singles, American Dream Plan B. Such a great underrated song in their discography. So I'm going with Fault Lines.
I'm going to let you know my pick right off the bat with those opening lyrics of, I saw a ghost by the road tonight, then my mind went away with me. All you can carry. Again, there's just something in Tom Petty's lyrics that whatever the riff, whatever the hook, whatever the groove, you can connect with the lyrics. You can just soak into the storytelling, right? Whether it's direct storytelling like you had in The Great Wide Open, or whether it's more abstract picture painting like this album and this song. Just absolutely love it. It stood out for me wholeheartedly. And finally, the last studio album before Petty passed away in 2017, Mudcrutch's 2 album, released May 20th, 2016. It hit number 10 on the Billboard 200 charts, number 3 on the top rock album charts, number 2 on the U.S. folk album charts, and singles included Trailer and Hungry No More. Brian, what have you got on this one? Because I think my pick might, raise a few hairs on some people. They might not like my pick, so I'm going to let you go first.
All right, I'm going to go with one that, again, Petty the storyteller. To me, this song is so haunting and so beautiful, and I couldn't think of a better way to close tonight out than with it. And it's a song called I Forgive It All. And we've been talking about lyrics all night, but I just want to spotlight these lyrics because it's from the last album Tom Petty put out when he was on this earth. People are what people make them. That ain't going to change. There ain't nothing you can do, nothing you can rearrange. But I forgive it all. I forgive it all. With her, I forgive it all. When you listen to that in this song and you don't well up and choke up, I don't know what to tell you, because every time I hear this song, I literally get a lump in my throat. I can't even sing along with it. It just, after the whole story that's being told, breaks my heart every time I hear it. And that is Tom Petty at his story writing best to me. So that is the song I picked.
So the one that really stood out for me, and this was more on the musical side of things, is not one with Tom Petty on lead vocals.
Oh,
I told you. I was going to end controversially here. But it's Randall Marsh on lead vocals. So I went with Beautiful World.
Nice.
The song itself, I mean, it really is a beautiful song to begin with. And, you can't discount the song just because it's not Tom Petty on vocals, right? That would be like eliminating Beth from Kiss's discography because it's not, Paul or Gene on vocals. It's a great song, and you have to take Mudcrutch as the band, in my opinion, not just Tom Petty. So even though it is Randall Marsh on lead, it's still a phenomenal song, and it's the standout for me on this one. So we have reached all 18 studio albums of Tom Petty. Brian, once again, please go through your list, and I'm going to ask you the tough question here. Of your 18 songs that you have selected from his entire studio discography, if there can only be one, what song is it?
All right. Well, I kick things off from 1976's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I went with Breakdown. From 77's You're Gonna Get It, I went with I Need to Know. From 78's Damn the Torpedoes, I went with Refugee. From 81's Hard Promises, I went with A Woman in Love, It's Not Me. From 82's Long After Dark, I went with You Got Lucky. From 85's Southern Accents, I went with The Best of Everything. From 87's Let Me Up, I Had Enough, I went with Think About Me. From 89's Full Moon Fever, I went with You're So Bad. From 91's Into the Great Wide Open, I went with Learning to Fly. From 94's Wildflowers, I went with Honeybee. From 96's She's the One, I went with Climb That Hill. From 99's Echo, I went with Swingin'. From 2002's The Last DJ, I went with When a Kid Goes Bad. From 2006's Highway Companion, I went with Saving Grace. From 2008's Mudcrutch, I went with The Wrong Thing to Do. From 2010's Mojo, I went with I Should Have Known It. From 2014's Hypnotic Eye, I went with Fault Lines. And from 2016's Mudcrutch 2, I went with I Forgive It All. And if there could only be one, I have to say it's the song that, had I not been introduced to it, I would not be the fan I am today. And that would be because of my parents and my father and mother introducing me, because of Chipmunk Punk, to the song Refugee. And that opened up the world to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers to me. And that is my only one song of the evening.
All right. From 1976's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, I've got Breakdown. From You're Gonna Get It, I went with Magnolia. From Damn the Torpedoes, I went with Even the Losers. From Hard Promises, A Woman in Love, It's Not Me. From Long After Dark, I went with Deliver Me. From 1985 Southern Accents, I went with Southern Accents. Off of Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, I've got It'll All Work Out. From Full Moon Fever, I went with I Won't Back Down. From 1991's Into the Great Wide Open, I've got Into the Great Wide Open. From Wildflowers, I've got Crawling Back to You. From Songs and Music from She's the One, I went with Grew Up Fast. From 1999's Echo, I've got One More Night, One More Day. From The Last DJ, I went with Joe. He's the CEO. From Highway Companion, I went with Saving Grace. From 2008's Mudcrutch, I went with 6 Days on the Road. From Mojo, I went with Running Man's Bible. From 2014's Hypnotic Eye, I went with All You Can Carry. And from Mudcrutch 2, I'm pretty sure I pissed someone off when I chose Beautiful World. But if there can only be one, it would have to be a song that, if I was ever able to turn back the clock and go see Tom Petty live, it would be a song that I would love to hear live, and that's Even the Losers. Musically, I so connect with it. Lyrically, I definitely connect with it, and it is a phenomenal song. Brian, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking Tom Petty. Where can we listen to My Weekly Mixtape, and remind us again what it's all about?
Will do. And I do want to say, we picked the same album for our only one songs, which is really, really cool. We both picked stuff from Damn the Torpedoes there. My Weekly Mixtape. You can find me at My Weekly Mixtape on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find My Weekly Mixtape by searching My Weekly Mixtape wherever you listen to podcasts. And I also have an entire website built where you can hear all the songs we're talking about, as well as the episodes, and that is myweeklymixtape.com. I always appreciate any feedback. If you contact after an episode, I love having the discussion with people after an episode airs, because that's what this is all about. Like tonight, Jason and I are having a conversation, and then after people hear this episode, I would hope that people reach out to the two of us and ask us why we pick certain songs over other ones, and continue that musical discussion, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. And I'm so thankful to have that opportunity to do that with you for such a long time this evening, man.
Oh, dude, it has been so much fun. And by the way, people who enjoy My Weekly Mixtape, you can also join Brian's Patreon to get early access on the show. So by all means, support the shows that you absolutely love. As far as listening to all the songs that you've heard discussed on tonight's show, you can go to my website at notthatbadcast.com, click on the There Can Only Be One section of the website, and you'll see the episode link as well as both of our playlists. Brian, thank you so much, not just for coming on here and talking Tom Petty, but for allowing me the space to be able to go into some of these albums that I have never heard before, like not one song, and really be able to appreciate Tom Petty the way that you have, because, you know, I love listening to new music. So this has been not just a fun, podcasting experience, but a fun musical journey as well to go down. And I hope you listeners do listen to some of these songs. Go check out the entire Tom Petty discography. I don't even think there's a bad song at all. Until next time, I'm Jay. This is the There Can Only Be One podcast. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.